The broadcast began with a sound that was not quite fire and not quite music, a low crackle threaded with screams. Across half the galaxy, screens shimmered to life with the same tableau. Human prisoners bound to blackened stakes, their uniforms tattered, their faces gaunt. The Empire's announcer, a scaled creature with a voice like grinding stone, described the execution as if reciting a recipe. The prisoners' bodies writhed as the flames consumed them, but the announcer never flinched, never paused. Around him, Imperial officers clapped politely, their golden insignias gleaming like trophies. The lesson, they declared, was simple. Earth was not to resist, for the punishment of resistance was immolation. The feed carried through markets and council halls, to distant moons where merchants and mercenaries gathered. Some laughed, some grimaced. A few lowered their heads in silence. But on Earth, in a crowded chamber buried beneath the Rockies, the room remained unervingly still. Men and women in gray uniforms stared at the feed without flinching, their faces carved into something beyond sorrow. The only sound was the hum of air recyclers, steady as a metronome. At the far end of the table sat one man, neither tall nor imposing. His suit was simple, his tie crooked as though he'd tied it in the dark. His hands rested loosely, palms upward, as if nothing in the world troubled him. He smiled faintly when the screen showed the last prisoner's defiance, an old sergeant who spat into the fire before his jaw dissolved in the heat. Stubborn to the end, the man murmured. His voice was gentle, almost amused. Around him, generals and ministers shifted uneasily, waiting for rage, for grief, for something sharper than calm. None came. His name, at least the one most used in official records, was Marcus Kane. He had been many things, a professor of comparative strategy, a negotiator at trade summits, once even a minor functionary in Earth's Agricultural Council. What few in the galaxy knew was that Marcus Kane had also commanded fire bases in 3 unrecorded border wars, and carried scars no suit could hide. When the broadcast ended, the lights flickered once, then steadied. No one spoke. Kane reached for the glass of water beside him, took a sip, and chuckled softly. "They made it look like a cooking show," he said. "Bit heavy on the smoke, though." The room's tension cracked, not into laughter, but into startled silence. A minister leaned forward. "Sir, with respect, this is war," Kane finished, setting the glass down with a delicate click. "Yes, I know." Far from Earth, in the vaulted chambers of the Galactic Council, the mood was livelier. Representatives of species, both insectal and avian, scaled and silicon, exchanged jokes about the ape problem. A cluster of delegates from the noble Vayari court declared the humans' cries had an oddly melodic timbre. Another from the Sauric syndicate compared them to livestock squealing before slaughter. Only one remained quiet, an elder of the Siraki, whose translucent skin shimmered with shifting lights. He had lived long enough to remember when another species, equally underestimated, had vanished beneath humanity's sudden rise. He whispered a warning to no one in particular. Predators hide their teeth until a strike. But his words drowned in the chorus of laughter. When Marcus Kane entered the council chamber 2 days later, he looked impossibly ordinary among the extravagant alien garb. He carried no weapon, no retinue, not even the ceremonial robes Earth had offered. Just a charcoal suit, scuffed shoes, and a battered leather briefcase. The guards scanned him twice, confused by his lack of ornament. When the sensors registered nothing, they let him pass, with bored disdain. Kane walked the aisle slowly, almost lazily, as though admiring the vaulted ceiling carved from the bones of some extinct beast. He adjusted his crooked tie, then bowed slightly to the presiding chair, a hulking four-eyed noble who stared down at him with amusement. "You arrive unarmed," the noble said. Kane's smile widened just enough. "Oh, I prefer not to carry matches into a fireworks store." A ripple of confusion spread through the chamber. Some translated the phrase literally and muttered about human pyrotechnics. Others laughed, thinking it a quaint ape proverb. Kane merely set his briefcase on the table and folded his hands. The chair leaned forward. "You have seen the lesson we broadcast. Do you understand it?" "I do," Kane replied softly. "You burned our people alive. And you thought the galaxy would learn to fear you. He paused, eyes twinkling. But I think the galaxy is learning something else. Whispers buzzed through the chamber. One delegate asked if Earth intended to retaliate. Another mocked, asking whether humans planned to throw sharpened sticks at Imperial cruisers. Kane listened with the patience of a man waiting in line at a bakery. Then he cleared his throat. We humans, we have certain traditions. One of them is the barbecue. You take something tough, something that resists flame, and you slow cook it until it yields. It takes hours, sometimes days. But when it's done, he let the pause hang. It falls apart in your hands. Laughter broke across half the chamber. A reptilian delegate clapped his claws together, mocking applause. The ape compares us to meat. How quaint. Kane's smile never wavered. Oh, I wasn't comparing. I was explaining. The elder Siraki stirred uneasily, his lights flickering with warning hues. But the others ignored him. After the session adjourned, Kane lingered by the great doors, greeting delegates with handshakes they found strange and slightly invasive. He asked about their families, their festivals, their favorite meals, jotting notes as though genuinely curious. His warmth disarmed them, his clumsy jokes earned chuckles, and even those who despised humans walked away thinking the ape was tolerable, if irrelevant. Only when the hall emptied did Kane let the smile fade. Alone in the echoing space, he pressed a hand to the briefcase and whispered, "Checkmate already." Back on Earth, news feeds replayed the broadcast of the burned prisoners, spliced with Kane's calm testimony. Citizens lit candles in windows, not for mourning, but for memory. Streets filled with quiet processions, no slogans, no shouted vengeance, just the sound of footsteps, steady as drums. Children painted stars on the sidewalks, each one representing a soul lost in fire. In orbit, ships that did not exist on any registry slipped from shadow docks. Crews worked in silence, welding armor plates and loading warheads with the precision of surgeons. The names of the fallen were etched into hulls, glowing faintly in blue script. The Empire mistook the silence for weakness. They mistook the smiles for surrender. But in the quiet corners of the galaxy, where smugglers and spies gathered, whispers spread like smoke. The humans were moving. Systems reported missing patrols. Supply lines crumbled. Outposts went dark without a sound. The pattern was invisible to those who believed humans incapable of strategy. But to those who watched closely, it was a net tightening. On the third night after the broadcast, the Siraki elder summoned a private council of his kin. They laugh, he told them, but I have seen this before. The humans are not mourning. They are waiting. And predators who wait, his lights dimmed in something like sorrow, are predators who strike with certainty. Yet even he did not see the full truth. Because on that same night, Kane sat alone in his quarters aboard a modest diplomatic vessel. He loosened his tie, poured himself a cup of bitter coffee, and opened the briefcase. Inside was no paperwork, no treaties. Only a single object, a charred piece of metal warped and blackened, pried from the execution ground itself. Across it, in faint scratches, were the last words of the sergeant who had spat into the flames. Never forgive. Kane traced the words with his finger, then closed the case. He leaned back, eyes half closed, and let out a breath that was almost a laugh. They think they taught us fear, he whispered. But all they did was light the coals. And as the ship drifted through the velvet dark of space, carrying the most polite man in the galaxy, the stars seemed to flare a little brighter, as though already anticipating the fire to come. The Galactic Council chamber glittered with arrogance. Chandeliers of crystallized starlight dangled from the vaulted ceiling, casting prismatic beams over rows of jeweled thrones. Delegates lounged as though the session were theater, their laughter echoing in overlapping languages. Humans were today's entertainment, the apes who thought themselves warriors, the primitives whose prisoners had been flambéed for the galaxy's amusement. At the far end of the oval floor, Marcus Kane stood again. Same scuff shoes, same crooked tie, same leather briefcase. He adjusted his cufflinks, as though preparing to lecture students instead of facing species who ruled 1,000 stars. His expression was genial, bordering on absent-minded. Ambassador Kane, the presiding chair, rumbled, his voice vibrating through the bones of the chamber. You were granted presence out of courtesy. Remember your place. Kane nodded amiably. Oh, I'm very fond of places. My father used to say, always know where you stand, especially if it's near a barbecue pit. Confusion rippled. A feathered delegate cocked her head, feathers bristling in annoyance. A slug-like noble bubbled in laughter, thinking it a joke. Kane smiled politely at both reactions. You humans are remarkable, said a spined representative from the core dominion, his voice dripping condescension. So noisy in death, so quiet in defeat. Perhaps you truly are evolving. Kane tilted his head. Evolving? That's a generous word. We prefer adapting. Like baseball. Baseball, sneered another. It's simple, Kane explained, his tone professorial. You wait. You watch. Nothing happens for a while. Everyone gets comfortable, maybe even bored. Then, he snapped his fingers lightly, the sound sharp in the cavernous room. One swing changes everything. And the crowd realizes they weren't watching a game. They were watching a hunt. The translator drones hummed, delivering his words in dozens of tongues. Some laughed again, amused at human eccentricities. Others frowned, hearing something sharp beneath the softness. The Siraki elder's skin pulsed with amber warning lights, but no one asked him to speak. After the session, the corridors buzzed with speculation. Delegates shared meals of fermented moss, sizzling meats, or liquid nitrogen cocktails, joking about the human diplomat who compared genocide to a picnic. Kane joined them freely, shaking hands, clinking glasses, even pretending to enjoy the foul-smelling nectar offered by a beetle-like envoy. His laugh was quiet, his questions disarmingly mundane. Do your children attend school? What music do your people sing? How do you season your food? Most answered with smug superiority. To them, the ape's curiosity was charming, if irrelevant. Only a few noticed his eyes, always observing, cataloging, filing details as though each offhand remark were ammunition. One evening, in a lavish hall filled with delegates, Kane told a story about hot dogs. He described a summer fair in Kansas, fireworks overhead, children sticky with mustard. The aliens chuckled at the absurdity of eating ground-up scraps in tubes. Kane's smile deepened. The trick, he said, is not what's in the hot dog. It's what's hidden. You don't always know. Could be beef, could be pork. Sometimes both. Sometimes neither. He shrugged casually. Surprises make it fun. Some laughed until they wheezed. Others shifted uncomfortably, reminded that the humans they burned had kept secrets too. Meanwhile, far from the chandeliers and feasts, imperial outposts began going dark. At first it was dismissed as technical failure, comms relays fried, navigation glitches. But when 3 patrol fleets vanished in the span of a week, suspicion whispered through military channels. The Empire dismissed public concern, declaring the losses insignificant. Privately, admirals barked orders into encrypted channels, demanding explanations. In smuggler ports, rumors bloomed like mold. A convoy of Imperial warships had been found drifting, hulls riddled with invisible shrapnel, crews suffocated in silence. A fortress moon reportedly exploded from within, as if its own reactors had been persuaded to rebel. None of it made sense until someone whispered a word that spread like infection. Humans. Back in the council chamber, Kane remained the picture of civility. He complimented an avian noble on her plumage, admired a crystalline envoy's reflections, even applauded a reptilian delegate's speech about agricultural exports. But between gestures, his words carried barbs. To us, he said lightly, silence is not surrender. It's seasoning. You marinate something long enough, it absorbs every flavor. When the fire comes, the taste lingers forever. An insectal envoy chittered in amusement. You speak always of food. Do humans think only with their stomachs? Kane chuckled. We think with memory. Food is memory. Fire is memory. And you've given us one hell of a recipe. The chamber quieted. For the first time, even laughter seemed dangerous. After adjournment, the Siraki elder approached Kane in a shadowed hallway. His translucent form shimmered with sorrowful hues. "You hide claws beneath velvet words," he said in a voice like wind through reeds. "They cannot see, but I do." Cain bowed slightly. "Then you know what comes next." The elder's colors flickered. "They will not believe me." "They don't need to," Cain replied softly. "They just need to keep laughing." That night, as Cain returned to his quarters, his comms unit buzzed with encrypted updates. More Imperial supply depots destroyed. Another fleet stranded without fuel. Saboteurs reported successful infiltration of communications relays. Cain read the lines with the calm of a man checking grocery lists. He poured himself coffee, the bitter steam curling upward. On the table, he placed a small metal box he had carried since Earth. He opened it, revealing the charred Imperial emblem, its edges warped. He traced the words scratched into its surface, "Never forgive." He sipped, set the cup down, and whispered, "Almost ready." Elsewhere, panic began to seed itself in unexpected places. A trade guild lost 3 months of profit when its shipments were hijacked by ghost fleets. Mercenaries refused contracts against human colonies, muttering about cursed assignments. Even the Empire's news feeds, normally controlled with precision, failed to suppress footage of destroyed armadas. Grainy images of burning cruisers circulated like contraband, each whispered replay sharpening the rumor. The humans were not weak. Inside the council chamber, tension bled through polite facades. Delegates who once mocked Cain now studied him with furtive glances. Was his crooked tie truly carelessness or a signal? Did his constant jokes about food conceal something coded? The humans smiled, unaware, or perhaps entirely aware, of their growing unease. One particularly brash delegate confronted him after session. A massive tusked warrior from the Krell Dominion shoved a clawed hand against Cain's chest. "Ape," he growled, "your people burn like kindling. Remember your place." Cain looked down at the hand, then up at the warrior's snarling face. His voice was soft, steady. "In my culture, friend, touching someone during conversation is considered intimate." He let the silence stretch, a smile tugging at his lips. "If this is a proposal, I'm flattered. But I must decline. I'm married to vengeance." The warrior blinked, confused by the cadence, then withdrew with a snarl. Cain brushed his tie back into place, murmuring almost playfully, "One swing changes everything." Behind the walls of diplomacy, fleets moved like sharks through dark water. Earth's allies, small powers long bullied by the Empire, sent quiet signals of support. Old grudges rekindled. Pirate clans pledged loyalty, eager for a fight that promised profit and legend. And all the while, Cain continued to play the fool, the professor with quaint metaphors, the ape who spoke of barbecue while the galaxy edged closer to fire. The shift became undeniable when the Imperial capital itself felt tremors. Explosions rocked its shipyards. Entire dreadnoughts toppled in cradles before launch. Alarms blared through the city, but officials stammered excuses about industrial accidents. In the council chamber the next day, murmurs filled the air. Cain entered last, carrying his briefcase as always. He set it down, straightened his tie, and looked around the room. "I brought a gift," he said lightly. He opened the briefcase. Inside lay a charred Imperial emblem identical to the one in his quarters, only this one was freshly blackened, its edges still reeking faintly of ash. Cain slid it across the table. "Compliments of last night's fireworks," he said. His voice remained calm, almost cheerful. "Barbecue tastes better slow-cooked." The silence was absolute. Not even the translators dared hum. The Siraki elder lowered his gaze, colors dimming in resignation. The rest of the chamber sat frozen, the laughter finally strangled in their throats. Cain leaned back, folded his hands, and smiled with the easy warmth of a man who had just finished a pleasant meal. His eyes, though, gleamed with something feral. And as the council stared at the smoldering emblem, realization began to dawn. Not fully, not yet, but enough to ignite a flicker of dread. For the mask had slipped, and beneath the polite smile was something no fire could burn away. The Empire's admirals expected the humans to scream. That was the way of the conquered. Fire and noise, flailing resistance. One last cry, before the blade fell. Instead, the humans whispered. Then they vanished. Patrols sent to crush their colonies found only empty skies, stations abandoned, dust swirling in artificial gravity. Entire systems were silent, their stars watched by nothing but patient satellites. In the Imperial War College, cadets laughed at the rumors. "The apes are hiding in cave again," one sneered. "Perhaps we should smoke them out like vermin." But their instructors frowned, for 3 fleets had already failed to return, and the silence of those voids was beginning to feel like a presence, a predator breathing in the dark. Marcus Kane watched the broadcasts in his quarters aboard a modest diplomatic ship orbiting neutral ground. He sat with his crooked tie undone, sleeves rolled, a steaming mug of bitter coffee in hand. Reports scrolled across the datapad beside him. Supply lines collapsing, communications rerouted into dead space, pirate clans suddenly flying human colors. He chuckled softly, not with joy but with inevitability. The mask was slipping now, and the galaxy was beginning to glimpse the teeth behind the smile. On the rim of Imperial territory, the first counterstrike arrived. A fleet of 200 ships, engines blazing, surged toward what intelligence promised was a human fortress world. They found instead a graveyard of steel, orbit cluttered with derelict hulks and faintly glowing debris. The admiral scoffed, assuming humans had fled, until the hulks came alive. Minds hidden in twisted wrecks, ignited in perfect synchronization. Railguns powered by cold-stored reactors tore through hulls. Artificial intelligences, piloting gutted frigates, rammed themselves into carriers. Within 20 minutes, half the Imperial fleet was gone, the rest fleeing blindly through mine-laced corridors of space. The humans didn't pursue. They didn't need to. They let the survivors carry the story back. Kane, summoned before the Galactic Council that same day, entered with his briefcase as usual. His smile was faint, his eyes calm. Delegates were less amused this time. They whispered as he passed, some shrinking from his gaze. He set the briefcase down gently, like a schoolteacher laying out lesson plans. Ambassador Kane, the presiding chair growled, his 4 eyes bloodshot. "Your people have violated every treaty of restraint. You are destabilizing the galaxy." Kane inclined his head politely. "Destabilizing? Oh no. We're redistributing gravity. You burned a few hundred of ours, and we warned you the coals would spread. Surely you didn't think we'd keep the fire contained." The chamber erupted in argument, condemnations, threats, pleas for restraint. Kane listened quietly, sipping from a cup of tea he had smuggled in. When the noise peaked, he set the cup down with a soft click. "My people have a saying," he murmured, voice low but sharp enough to slice through the din, "don't start what you can't finish." The Siraki elder lowered his gaze, colors flickering mournfully. He alone seemed to grasp that humanity had already finished, and the galaxy was only now realizing it. Meanwhile, the counterstrikes multiplied. Colonies once loyal to the Empire erupted in revolt, emboldened by human whispers. Saboteurs turned shipyards into funeral pyres. Data viruses slipped into Imperial command systems, rerouting fleets to false coordinates. When admirals barked for reinforcements, they arrived at empty sectors, or worse, traps where human cruisers waited, cloaked in the electromagnetic shadows of moons. And the humans mocked them while doing it. Broadcasts cut into Imperial frequencies, showing soldiers laughing around campfires, holding mugs of steaming coffee, strumming guitars. Their taunts were simple, unshaken. "Thanks for the ships. They roast nicely." Or, "You like fire? We brought marshmallows." The humor unsettled the galaxy more than the destruction. Enemies who laughed while burning you were not simply fighters. They were something worse. They were predators enjoying the hunt. In one broadcast, a young human pilot appeared, freckles dusting her cheeks. She spoke calmly, smiling as if chatting across a dinner table. "You wanted us afraid. But you forget, we're the species that plays chicken with cars on asphalt. Fear is just the seasoning." Across the Empire, soldiers began to refuse deployment against humans. Some deserted. Some shot their officers rather than board ships heading toward Earth. Panic spread in whispers, The apes had turned the fire back on its masters. Yet Cain, in every council session, remained courteous. He complimented the crystalline envoy on his gleaming facets, congratulated the avian noble on a hatchling's birth, even helped an arthropod delegate pick up spilled documents with deliberate care. His charm was maddening because it never faltered, even as the galaxy unraveled. "Do you enjoy this?" a reptilian envoy snapped one day, scales rattling with fury. "Do you enjoy watching the galaxy burn?" Cain smiled kindly, as if soothing a frightened child. "Enjoy? No. But I do believe in balance. You see, when you burned our prisoners alive, you thought it would scare us. Instead, it gave us permission. And humans, once given permission, rarely stop at half measures." The envoy recoiled, speechless. Outside the chamber, a different war raged. Imperial dreadnoughts, once the pride of the fleet, fell to ambushes in asteroid belts. Human saboteurs hacked fuel systems, leaving capital ships adrift. On one occasion, an entire Imperial convoy detonated when its own ammunition bays mysteriously overheated at the same moment. Investigators whispered about human infiltration so deep it bordered on sorcery. And still, Cain walked calmly through council halls, briefcase in hand, shoes scuffed, tie crooked. The smile never quite reached his eyes anymore, but the charm remained. It was during a private dinner, hosted by neutral envoys, that the mask slipped further. Cain sat at the table's end, sipping wine he clearly disliked. Across from him, a silicon-bodied delegate sneered. "You humans are liars. You claim weakness, while striking with hidden claws. What is your true aim?" Cain set down the glass, gently. His eyes, when he lifted them, were steady and cold. "Our aim? Survival. But survival, for us, doesn't mean hiding. It means ensuring no one ever thinks of burning us again. Not once. Not ever. You asked what we want. We want your children to tell ghost stories about us for the next 1,000 years." The room chilled. Forks paused midair. Even the neutral envoys stared in silence. Cain smiled again, softer now, almost apologetic. "Forgive me. I get dramatic after bad wine." But the words lingered, heavy as stone. The next week, the Empire attempted a decisive blow. A fleet larger than any before, 500 ships, descended on the Sol system. They expected resistance. They did not expect emptiness. Earth's orbit looked barren, her stations powered down, cities dark from orbit. The admirals laughed, convinced the humans had fled or surrendered. They moved closer. That was when the planet lit up. Satellites disguised as scrap flickered alive, unleashing beams that carved through cruisers. Mines detonated in layered waves, herding the fleet into kill zones. Human warships, hidden beneath lunar regolith and deep ocean caverns, erupted upward like sharks breaching for prey. The sky became an inferno. One admiral, moments before his flagship split in two, screamed into comms. They were waiting for all of us at once. Marcus Cain listened to the battle reports in silence, his hands folded. Around him, council delegates shouted, demanded explanations, cursed him. He waited for the noise to fade, then stood, adjusting his crooked tie. "My father taught me baseball," he said quietly. "You don't swing at every pitch. You wait for the right one. And then, when it comes," his hand sliced the air, the motion sharp as the collapse of a fleet. "You end the game." The silence that followed was not confusion this time. It was fear. The Siraki elder lowered his head, lights dimmed in resignation. "It begins," he whispered. Cain gathered his briefcase, bowed politely, and walked from the chamber without haste. Behind him, the delegates erupted again, their voices trembling now. No longer certain laughter could protect them. In his quarters, he opened the briefcase. Inside, beneath the charred emblem, lay a datapad glowing with one phrase in bold human script. "Operation Widowmaker, Phase 2 initiated." Cain touched the screen, his face calm, almost serene. He whispered to himself, as though speaking to the ghosts of those burned alive. "Now, it's your turn to watch the fire." The galaxy burned in whispers before it burned in flames. Supply chains ruptured. Empires that had boasted invincibility now argued in council halls about missing fleets, sabotaged reactors, colonies in revolt. The imperial news feeds continued to declare strength, yet each broadcast carried a quiver beneath the words. Even the images of humans once mocked as weak now returned in visions too sharp to ignore. Soldiers standing in firelight, civilians carrying candles with grim resolve. Marcus Kane's soft voice telling stories of barbecue and baseball, while entire armadas vanished into silence. The imperial capital itself trembled with unease. Crowds rioted when fuel shortages struck. Dissenters painted crude human faces on walls, sometimes with fanged smiles, sometimes haloed in fire. The governors called it vandalism. The citizens called it prophecy. Marcus Kane returned to the council chamber not as a guest, but as a shadow already stretched across the galaxy. His shoes scuffed softly against the polished floor, his tie still crooked, his leather briefcase worn at the edges. He moved without hurry, without pomp, yet every gaze followed him. Where once the chamber had roared with laughter, now silence hung taut, each delegate measuring his words before daring to speak. The presiding chair glared with all four eyes, his robes twitching with suppressed rage. "Ambassador Kane," he hissed, "your people have ignited chaos. You destabilize star systems, you destroy fleets, and you," his voice faltered, as if the words themselves recoiled, "you corrupt the very order we built." Kane bowed his head slightly, his smile warm and unfazed. "Order? Forgive me, but when you burn prisoners alive on a stage, that's not order. That's theater. And humans are very good critics of bad theater." A crystalline envoy bristled, light refracting sharply from his body. "You jest as though lives are not burning." "Oh," Kane replied softly, "we know exactly what burning lives mean. That's why we do not jest. We remember." The chamber shivered with the weight of that word. Remember. For humanity, memory was more than archive. It was inheritance. It was vengeance passed down like blood. Reports streamed in while Kane spoke. The Empire's Great Northern Fleet routed. Entire sectors refusing to pay tribute. Smugglers declaring allegiance to human convoys. In the shadows, Operation Widowmaker expanded. Every strike carried precision. Every defeat was not random, but orchestrated. The galaxy began to realize this was not retaliation born of rage, but strategy designed years, perhaps decades, in secret. At a private gathering that evening, Kane sat across from the Siraki elder. The elder's translucent body pulsed faintly with grief. "They did not listen," he whispered. "I told them you hid teeth behind soft words. I told them predators wait for silence." Kane folded his hands, polite as always. "Then you understand why the waiting is over." The elder lowered his gaze. "You will not stop, will you?" Kane's voice was calm, almost gentle. "You burned a few hundred of ours alive. You tried to make fear a spectacle. But you only gave us permission. And humanity, once permitted, rarely leaves a job unfinished." That night, while the council still argued, the humans moved. Fleets hidden in voids lit their engines. Satellites disguised as scrap blinked awake. Viruses buried in Imperial code decades earlier unraveled encryption, like children pulling at loose threads. Across the galaxy, lights went out, planetary defenses offline, comms network silent, gates collapsing into dark. The Empire's admirals screamed into dead channels. The soldiers panicked. Civilian populations, long cowed by Imperial brutality, erupted in revolt when the sky above them no longer bore the Empire's shadow. The galaxy was no longer a map of Imperial red. It was a wildfire, and the humans had struck the match. In the council chamber the next morning, delegates arrived shaken, robes askew, feathers bent, scales dulled. Kane entered last, briefcase swinging gently, expression serene. He placed it on the table and sat, folding his hands. "Last night," he said softly, "we concluded Phase 2 of our operation. Entire fleets neutralized. Capitals crippled. Supply lines severed. You may be wondering why we spared this chamber." He looked around with warm eyes that gleamed with cold truth. "Because we needed you to watch." The chair slammed a fist against the table. "You dare lecture us?" Kane tilted his head. No, not lecture. Demonstrate. We humans don't like speeches without examples. Consider this show and tell. He opened the briefcase. Inside lay fragments of hull plating from Imperial dreadnoughts, still blackened, still warm with radiation. He set them gently on the polished surface, like trophies at a school exhibition. The delegates recoiled, some whispering prayers in languages older than their stars. "You burned our people alive," Kane said. His voice no longer carried humor, no sly wit. It carried finality. "We warned you the coals would spread, and now the fire is at your gates." Outside, as if on cue, alarms wailed across the city. Explosions rocked the Imperial capital's shipyards. Flames lit the sky in the exact same hue as those execution fires once broadcast with glee. The council chamber shook. Panic flared, delegates scrambling for exits. Kane did not move. He sat calmly, fingers resting on the edge of the briefcase, watching with the patience of a professor waiting for his students to understand the lesson. Only the Siraki elder remained seated, lights flickering with sorrowful inevitability. "This," Kane said, voice carrying above the chaos, "is not revenge. Revenge ends with fire and ashes. This is memory. Memory made permanent. We want your grandchildren to inherit a galaxy where no one dares burn humans again. Not once. Not ever." In the corridors outside, soldiers clashed with unseen saboteurs. Emergency feeds displayed burning warships, shattered docks, civilians fleeing. But amidst the panic, whispers grew louder. The humans had planned this all along. Kane rose, gathering his briefcase. He straightened his crooked tie, smoothed his wrinkled jacket, and offered a small, polite bow. "We are very polite neighbors," he said softly, "until you touch our family." Then he let the pause stretch, the chamber trembling around him. "Welcome to the barbecue." The words lingered even as alarms drowned the chamber. Delegates stared at him with terror, some collapsing into their seats, others fleeing in frantic desperation. The Siraki elder closed his eyes, his lights dimming, whispering one final truth to himself. The reckoning has come. Kane stepped into the hallway as soldiers rushed past him, too panicked to stop a man who walked with such quiet certainty. Outside, the sky blazed with burning ships. The Empire was no longer the master of order. It was prey caught in its own snare. In his quarters later, Kane placed the charred emblem beside the hull fragments. He poured himself coffee, the steam rising into the dim air. He stared at the artifacts of fire and ruin, the ghosts of burned prisoners whispering in memory. He lifted the cup, sipped, and smiled faintly. "We don't start wars," he murmured. "But once you show us fire," his eyes hardened, steel beneath the warmth, "we finish them." Far above the capital, human ships emerged from void space, their hulls painted with the names of the fallen. They drifted into formation, not as an invading force, but as executioners of a verdict already delivered. The galaxy watched trembling, as the polite predators finally bared their teeth. And in that moment, the true reckoning began.